Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to do a different kind of video. I know I've been doing a lot of heavy edited guide content for the last year or so, but I just finished playing Days Gone and I want to try more of a freeform kind of thoughts video. I might start doing first impressions and then current thoughts and then like final thoughts if there's a game that I could technically finish, like Days Gone. And then we'll just kind of, it won't have a structure to it. I'll just kind of get out all my thoughts. And my goal is to try and play more games and spend less time editing just to get more content out there. So let's talk about Days Gone. I did not play it on console, so I waited until it came out on PC before I picked it up and tried it. Days Gone is a zombie survival game. It's a story-driven zombie survival game. So, you know, it's kind of like Last of Us, that kind of strategy where you have a very heavy story and then a lot of open world zombie survival mechanics to go through it. It's a relatively long game. I think I got about 35-40 hours for completion, maybe, yeah, around there. And I think you can get, I think average playthrough is probably going to be 50 to 60 just because there's so much to do. So I think overall I would recommend Days Gone. The story feels fresh and different. It's not just kind of your everyday zombie encounter. They have some nice mechanics that help make it feel new relative to all the zombie games we've been playing for a long time. Things like the Hordes, which basically function as a single entity, right? You'll see a lot of zombies clustering together and then moving as a single unit. I imagine they're just kind of added to a list of AI, or maybe it's just one single actor and they're all kind of following something there. But the Horde mechanic is really cool. It's probably one of the few times in zombie games where I felt truly overwhelmed by zombies. Even in games, you know, like World War Z or those where you have a lot of swarms, they never felt as insane as the hordes that you get in Days Gone. And I think they did an awesome job with that mechanic. Though I will say, for Days Gone, especially on PC, I think it had more than the dismissible amount of bugs, right? Like, especially with big games and big titles like Days Gone, which I'm sure took, you know, tens of millions of dollars and a lot of time to get done. I think there's a certain amount of bugs or scuffed elements to a game that you're just going to have to accept, right? Because there's just no way that you can make a game without there being bugs. It's just, there's no way you can cover all the cases, all the different ways you could use it. I mean, and the games that are AAA that have very few bugs, there is a bug fixing is a mentality from the get-go, and not all studios have the luxury of planning for bugs early when they're trying to make a living, right? So if it's their first game or second game, or they're trying to find their first success, they can't be spending a lot of extra time quality, doing QA and bug fixing if they don't even know if the game's going to work or make them money, right? So like there's a very real world monetary element to the bug fixing that comes along with it. And I think unfortunately, Ben's studio, we talked about it when I started the series, but Ben's studio has done a lot of DLCs and a few titles for other games, but I think this is their first real foray into gaming. They obviously have a lot of very experienced veterans in the game. They did a lot of things very well in Days Gone that I was excited about. The storytelling, the animation, the motion capture, a lot of the textures and modeling was really clean and good. They had really good sound effects. The sound mixing had a lot of issues, and there was also the sound spatialization on where the sound is located around you wasn't very good. Oftentimes I would hear a zombie behind me when they were just in front of me, and things like that, right? So their localization, or not the localization, the spatialization for the audio wasn't that great. And there were a lot of scuffed moments where the pathing got broken, and it actually ruined a couple boss fights for me. The Reacher fight got busted the first time. I reloaded it to try and get it to play right the second time, and then it just wasn't very challenging. And then I had tons of like breakers and zombies and all kinds of things getting stuck places and not being able to path to me, which kind of takes your immersion out of the game, right? You're not able to get into it when you can kind of abuse broken pathing or the AI stops functioning and things like that. The looting and the crafting was awesome in the second half of the game. You started getting a lot of recipes. You started getting, remote bombs and large Molotovs and really cool weapons and mechanics that you can make the game really interesting. I think my gripe with the crafting and the collection aspect was it it was so limited in the first half of the game, right? The first 20 hours, the looting was very one-dimensional. It was like you need rags, sterilizer, and kerosene, and you're looting the same things over and over in the same way. And the things that you crafted weren't really all that interesting either. It was just like, I need ammo and I need scrap to fix my weapons, and that's it. So I think my first impression of the game wasn't as good, right? There was a lot of bugs. For a ship title that shipped 2 years ago that they just ported to PC, there were a lot of bugs. The crafting was limited. The open world felt kind of stale. And there was a lot of formulaic things being used, like this car is always the car you push. So when you see this blue truck, you know you're going to push it, kind of thing, right? There wasn't as much variety to help mask those repeated efforts. And then you get to the second half of the game and the crafting just opens up like crazy. You get tons more weapons. You get tons of crafting options. You get all these new recipes, different ways to interact. You have attractors, you have all kinds of things. So it's almost like the first land that you start out in Days Gone was a little bit too kid gloves, right? It's like, you know, earmuffs, like it felt like it protected you a little too much. And I wish they would have scaled that a little bit more to get some more crafting and some more varied gameplay in the first half of the game, considering that that's where you're going to lose people the most, right? People won't make it to the end of the game unless they're already enjoying it or they have a reason to continue, right? So that part, I think they could have moved the crafting down into the first half of the game and just made it a little more varied. There's also more that they could have done, like I said, to mask any of the optimization and performance changes they made, right? Like it was very obvious when they were trying, like you would get the same survivor over and over for like open world rescues. Like it's the same model. They do some rigid body adjustments or some squash and stretch, but it's the same model. It's the same voice. It's the same dialogue, right? So like it's just very similar. And like I said, the pushable, interactable cars were always the same. It was either the Humvee or the blue truck. And every time you saw it, you know it was that interactable object. Some of the puzzles were very simple and identical. And also there were a lot of issues with dialogue playing multiple times, right? And this is actually a hard thing to do for open world games, is try to do long story dialogue, because you don't know if you're going to be in the middle of a dialogue segment over the radio when you encounter a horde or when you encounter a rager bear or something like that. You don't know what's going to interrupt the dialogue. And so you have to have a system that allows that to kind of pause, because obviously you're not going to listen to whoever's talking to you on the radio when you're being attacked by a horde of zombies. So it pauses and then it kind of resets the audio you were listening to if you didn't finish it, and then plays it again. And that happened like, you know, say it was like a 25-second segment of dialogue. If you got encountered battle with a horde or something at second 24 out of 25, like it was about to finish, as soon as you exited combat, it would start again at the beginning. So you'd hear the whole dialogue again. So I think there's like a lot of polished elements that kind of took me, like I heard the same dialogue maybe 4 or 5 times in some cases, and I couldn't skip it. It was just repeating over and over and over. So I think there's just like a lot of quality of life, polish elements, specifically around the sound and just repeated elements in the world that could have been a lot better. I think they did wildlife in a really fun and unique way. Most zombie games are about the zombies, right? But I actually had some of the most unique encounters with wildlife, like wolves, infected wolves, bears, infected bears, and then infected crows, things like that. They added a completely new element to a zombie survival game. And in many cases, I was more afraid of getting knocked over by a wolf or getting attacked by a pack of wolves than I was dealing with the zombies, because the zombies, you know, they're a little bit more straightforward and predictable, whereas the wildlife comes out of nowhere. So that was a really cool element to have in a game like this. And you had like that Leonardo DiCaprio Revenant moment where the bear gets on you and things like that. I think that's really cool. The story played out. There was a couple of cliches in it, right? Like I think they did almost too much foreshadowing where you kind of knew where the story was going. But it wasn't so over the top that it ruined it. It was just kind of like, you know, charming and simplistic, and it really fit together. The idea of having the Nero helicopters and the Nero part of it as like a resource in the sky, and the fact that Deacon becomes more and more of a badass as you go through the story really helps develop his character and fit him into the world. And as you go through the camps and meet new people and have those people come together. And I think they also did a good job of tying all the loose ends of the story back together, right? Because you have a first area of characters and a second area of characters. And then as you reach the end of the game, those two areas clash and you have different things that happen, right? You have, characters that you were attached to die or go away, and new characters that you didn't like at first, but now you really like them. So I think the writing was very enriching and they had some cool elements to it. And I think that overall the experience of fighting the hordes, the late game crafting was really good. The combat felt good. And I think the general vibe of the world was good. So all of that put together, I think, is enough to kind of squash out the bugs and the jank that this game came with. And I think it also kind of helped bring the overall experience down into one thing. So I really enjoyed my time with Days Gone. My critique would be just the first half of the game felt very repeated and very stale in some places. And it got really good at the end. And I just wish they would have smoothed that out a little bit better just to make things fit the progression of how you unlock things. Another gripe that I had too was I honestly didn't feel like any of the boss fights were really all that meaningful. I played on the hard 2 difficulty. I didn't want to do a playthrough on survival 1 or 2 just because I wanted to have the HUD there for anyone watching. But I played on hard 2 and almost all the boss fights were almost laughable in difficulty. I mean, when the Reacher showed up, you can 3-shot him. When you fight Carlos, he didn't even hit me. Like, it was just like this short, all this build up for like this story fight that just kind of ended very easily. There's just a lot of encounters that I was hoping were going to be challenging and interesting and fun that were just kind of underwhelming and didn't really provide any challenge or difficulty for me at all. I think the fight that was probably the hardest is like the first time you fight a Rager Bear. Like I said, wildlife was probably the hardest thing in the game. And then maybe the first breaker, he took a lot of ammo. He wasn't difficult to dodge, but he took a lot of ammo to take down. Everything else, like the Reacher, Carlos, any of those other boss fights just felt kind of weak. In fact, the hordes were more interesting and engaging than any of the boss fights were as well. Like the old Sawmill horde fight, the massive horde fight, that one was super fun. It's cool to run around and have all these escapes and different ways to fight it, and it's really good stuff. The bike was a cool aspect of the game, right? A lot of times you have to fast travel or you end up getting, just running around. So it's nice to have this open world that you can explore with a bike. And then a lot of times, you have to make sure you're fueling up all the time, taking care of your bike. You have ways to break it. The bike battles were really cool. They were kind of slow, but they were, reminiscent of just like really fun biking or road combat games. So I think they did that well. That was fun. It was kind of cool to chase people down and track them down as a bounty hunter, and then get into a race with them where you kind of try to beat them and whatever else. So like that part was really cool. I like the fact that you can fast travel, but it takes fuel. So it still has that survival aspect where you have to kind of still bring things together and you have to make sure you're managing your resources properly. Otherwise you can't fast travel. That was a cool, nice touch for me. And another thing that it's probably worth covering, the PC port, right? Because everyone wants to know, oftentimes when games are on console, on a specific platform first and they get ported to another one, right? If they start on console and they go to PC, there's usually just some input issues that come out of it, right? Because you're used to allowing players to use the controller as an input. And if you have a PC first that goes to console, oftentimes the menus have really hard navigation because you don't have the freedom of a mouse cursor that can go anywhere and do anything. So a lot of times there's just some weirdness. I would say overall, the PC port worked well. Aim down sights worked perfectly. The aim was kind of good, except when enemies got really close to you, right? When they were right on top of you, the aim would get off. And I think there was some issues with changing shoulders. They would change the aim as well. I'm assuming the issue where enemies got close to you and you couldn't aim on PC was just from, projectile offset or wherever the aiming starts to make sure it lines up with the art. There might be just some very close, like dead zones that you can't shoot in. But overall, it worked well, performed well. I didn't have any major performance issues. The one thing that I think that they probably should have fixed before going to PC was the crafting and item selection menu. So it's a radial, which is very common on console, right? It works great. I mean, a 360-degree radial, when you have a input of an analog stick that's 360 degrees, it's a match made in heaven, right? So you can kind of just angle it to like northwest or south, and then you can select the item you want. And the way that menu works in console, I'm imagining works perfectly. You just angle up at the item and let go of the analog stick and it selects it. I think the problem is the input on PC is faster, which means that you can click on something and let go. And this happened to me the entire playthrough, all the way through. I would go open the crafting menu or the item menu, select an item with my mouse and let go. And I was probably waiting for some kind of grace period to give me the item, but equipping items with PC was very buggy. I would try to select the item and it would fail. And I think the only way I was able to fix it is you have to, almost treat your mouse like it's an analog stick and aim it up at the direction you're trying to go, and then let go of both buttons and don't do anything until your item is equipped. Like there was a delay there you had to wait through. And if you didn't wait through it, you would end up getting nothing. Like it just wouldn't equip anything, which kind of screwed me a couple times. So that was probably the major issue with the PC port. Otherwise performed well. It was fun, super good. And I think that's all my thoughts on Days Gone. If you like zombie survival games, you'll like this game. It's got a great story. As you go through the game, it gets better and better. The combat's interesting. And I really enjoyed the characters and how they set it up in the open world and, all of that. So great game. Highly recommend. Just kind of note some of the early game issues and some of the scuffed elements, even for a game of this caliber. But yeah, man, it's great. So those are my unfiltered, unorganized thoughts on Days Gone since I just finished it yesterday. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you in the next one.